Welcome to the Art Basics and Style Terms presentation. And in this presentation, you get your first look at the language of art. Some of this language you're going to be very familiar with, but you might be classifying it in ways that you don't know, or you might not know the labels of it. So it's just important that you understand this terminology, because from here on out, you're going to hear it used quite a bit in class. And we want to make sure that you understand this language, because these are things that are used often, and we need to make sure that as you are learning more and more about art, that you're comfortable using this terminology, because say for your midterm and for the final paper you write, you will need to be using this terminology. So some of the basic terms, we start with dates, and the dates are very simple. So rather than using the Christian BC and AD, before Christ and after death, we use a more globally accepted terminology. So we use BCE versus CE. And why we do this. So of course, in our Western standard, we center the existence on Christianity, but in the global community, both Eastern and Western art is equally celebrated, and therefore we don't make the center of things Christianity and offend half the world. And also, it's important to understand that actually BCE and CE are more accurate, because we started recording time, the Common Era. We came into the Common Era when paper was invented, and history started being written down consistently. So it's, before that, in before the Common Era, we do have some reports of what was happening, but a lot of it was destroyed, and most of it we had to have archaeologists decipher and figure out what it meant from artwork and artifacts. And so this is where we move into the Common Era, because paper is invented and people are consistently writing down their own histories. So now we have the history of Europe, we have the history of China, we have the history of Japan. So it becomes a much larger thing. So it's actually not about Christ's death when we move into the Common Era. And we are in 2020 of the Common Era. So Christianity, in many other circumstances as well, has gone in and used kind of the basic formation of things to strengthen the faith of believers. And so centering time itself around Christ, you can understand how that would shape things in the minds of the people. And we want to make sure that we just understand that this is one of those things that they use this for, in the same way that they took pagan religions and turned them into Christian ones, and then moved the dates of important things like Jesus's birthday, and moved it to coincide with a pagan holiday, so that people would celebrate their religious holiday instead of the pagan one, and things like that. So it's not that they did something that was really wrong, because that was kind of how things worked back then, and they were in charge, so they made the decisions. So it made sense that they would center time around Christianity, because the Christians were the ruling house of the Western world, and the Western world and the Eastern world were so divided that that it would make a lot of sense that they would put Christ at the center of time. And excuse me, not I don't mean divided, but they were separate, so separated. So the only other thing about this is it's kind of like a negative number. The higher that negative number is, the further away from zero it is. And it's the same thing with before the Common Era. So 500,000 BCE is much older than 350 BCE. And usually, if it's before the Common Era, the BCE will be there. But if it's after the Common Era, then the dates are just provided. Now, the next thing that's important to understand is what is art. And this is where we talk about the difference between media and mediums. Media are the materials that an artwork is made out of, like oil on canvas or marble, charcoal on paper. Notice the two-dimensional ones not only tell you what the media is the oil paint or the charcoal, but because it's two-dimensional and it requires that substrate to be created on, we always mention what the substrate is, even though the actual media is oil paint or charcoal or graphite, etc. But because the paper is a part of the artwork in terms of you couldn't have the drawing without the paper there, we acknowledge what the surface is. So it might be on paper, it might be on wood or panel is wood, or canvas, things like that. So just a quick kind of rundown. This obviously isn't everything, but this just kind of gives you a good idea. So two-dimensional artwork. This is artwork that's defined by its height and width. Drawings, paintings, printmaking, photography, graphic design would all fall in this category. The painting could be traditional painting, but it could also be digital painting. In 3D, we have sculpture. We have craft. Now, craft is when we have art that's more functional, like ceramics, woodworking, furniture, metalsmithing, jewelry, glass designs, etc. Architecture, fiber art. Fiber art is when it's made out of fabric or yarn or things like that. And this can be when you make a quilt, but this could also be something that falls into the fine arts. There's a lot of fine artists who work in fiber, but like the textile work and things along those lines. And then 4D, the fourth dimension being time, is where we get film and video. They're two different processes, so we do delineate the difference. Game design, website designs, animation, digital and analog, performance art, and sound art. Again, there can be more than that, but those are kind of the basics. Now, one of the things I want you to, kind of know and realize is that art is kind of a moving target, and it is constantly moving and changing, and the things that are considered art are constantly evolving. But it's really important to understand that art is created by someone. There is a maker or a designer. Someone has created that artwork. So even though nature is a very beautiful thing, the nature itself cannot be the artwork. Perhaps it's the photographer has captured that, and the photograph itself is the artwork, but it's not the nature itself. Just as an FYI, sometimes students misunderstand that. And then the difference between a medium and a media is medium is plural of media. So drawing is the medium, and the medias would be graphite pencils and charcoal and colored pencils and pastels, so on and so forth, if that makes sense. And sculpture is the medium, and the media is quite diverse. Sculptures could be made out of really anything, but some of the standards would be marble, bronze, wood, plaster. So just to kind of give you an idea of what that is and how that terminology is used. So as you read, you understand that, and as you go to use the language, you know which one to choose. Now, the form of an artwork is its physical appearance, what it looks like. And you notice down below subject matter, we have content, which is the meaning of the artwork. And artists are taught that the form and content have to go together. And you, as an evaluator, basically, you're evaluating or analyzing artwork in this class and learning about the art and how to understand it from that kind of take, from that viewpoint. Will be deciding if the form and content go together. What do we mean by this? So I love to use the example of like a painting or a sculpture of a cat. Now, usually about half the room thinks cats are these sweet, lovable, fuzzy, petable creatures. And then the other half feels that they are vicious little murderers that would eat your face off. And it doesn't matter which one of those opinions you hold, but if you were trying to portray one of those two things in your artwork, the form of the artwork would look different. So if you wanted your cat to be a sweet, warm, fuzzy little creature, you might not use knives to create the artwork out of. Or you might not have in a painting the cat lunging out as if they are about to attack you. You know, like, so like the physical appearance of the work would be different, right? So, but for the other meaning, that would coincide, because if the form doesn't work with the content, people will never understand the meaning. And that's why artists are taught that. So for you guys, usually what I teach is that's an important thing to understand, because the physical appearance of the work often leads you to understand the meaning. And that's why even just doing a basic visual analysis without any additional research, you can start to glean quite a bit of the meaning from it. Now, when you do more research on it, it becomes more and more interesting and you learn more and more about it. But you would be amazed at what you can learn just by spending some time looking and seeing that artwork and looking at the details in the work and starting to analyze those things. So the subject matter is what is depicted, literally what you see. So I have this tiny artwork here in the top right corner so that we can explain this and make sure you understand, because sometimes students confuse subject matter, content, and context, the three other things on this page. So the subject matter is literally what you see. So if I'm just describing what I see, this is in your own language, but you don't need any art language in this description. There is a woman in a red dress near the center of the painting, slightly to the right. She holds a crystal ball. If I wanted to expand upon that, I would say there is a half circle window in the background behind her. In front of her on the left-hand side of the painting is a table, and a book sits on top of it, and a skull sits next to the book. And there is a curtain behind that table. Behind the woman, there is a chair all the way to the right-hand side of the canvas. So this is kind of how you describe it, right? I'm just literally telling the reader what is in the artwork. It's almost as if they're not able to view the work. They can still get a really good idea of what's going on. Now, content is what it means. So what it means is a young woman gazing into a crystal ball in an attempt to perform a spell with the assistance of a book and a skull. So that was the meaning that I came up with. Because what are crystal balls used for? And why would the woman have a skull? Um, Now, the context is just about putting the artwork in a bigger picture. So this gives us kind of some history, politics, religious beliefs that might be affecting the artwork, affecting the making of the artwork, decisions the artist might have made. So this is not just random history or random political beliefs or random religious beliefs, but ones that may have affected the decisions the artist made when they created the artwork. So for instance, it's possible that at the time this was made, that witchcraft was outlawed and this was a very serious offense. And you could come up with that and go run with it if that has something to do with the artwork. That's not the context that I found. The context that I found was that the skull had been painted over because the owner did not like the look of it, and was only found when the castle it was hanging in sold in the 1950s, and the painting was placed up for auction. So that black curtain on the left-hand side, they just extended it to get rid of the skull. And it had been hanging in this castle since the 1300s. So for a very, very long time, that skull was hidden. So that's some pretty interesting context. It just kind of tells you some interesting information about the artwork, but also pertinent information. Because this particular thing had to do with what the artwork looked like for so long, that's why I chose it. But it could also have to do with the art movement it's a part of. It could do with the the period that it's a part of and how it looks like other artwork, and things like that, and so on and so forth. Now, aesthetics can be a confusing concept for students because it is the concept. It's not the same as beauty, but it is the concept of making art look beautiful. But aesthetics can also refer to something ugly. And this is how, if you think about if you've ever been attracted to something that is like, you find it really appealing, but it's kind of disgusting and gross, like the way that it looks, that's aesthetics. There's something appealing about it. It's important to understand that different cultures have different aesthetics, and so do different time periods. And usually in art, what happens is the majority finds something aesthetically pleasing. That's kind of the way that it's described. And that becomes kind of a cultural icon because of it. Although most cultural icons are chosen after the fact by historians. So some are chosen by the culture itself, but a lot of things are chosen by historians over time. So for instance, Impressionism is an artwork that a lot of students are familiar with, and if you have no familiarity with it, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is like Degas, who painted the ballet dancers, and Monet, who painted the Japanese gardens and the water lilies and things like that. And there's several other Impressionists, but those are usually the two that students are most familiar with. They were actually hated at their time period, and nobody liked them because they weren't interested in realism. They kind of changed the concepts and what was going on and what was considered the most important concepts. They were breaking away from traditional art at the time period. But it was such an important thing, and historians placed so much importance on that. And so a lot of the art that you look at, a lot of the art that is remembered as the most important art, was not actually popular during that time period. And so it's just important that you understand that. um, that it's about who writes the books in the end, right? But again, back to aesthetics. I like to use the female figure because this is something that's easy for a lot of students to understand, and the same concept relates to artwork. So as I explain this and it kind of sinks in and you understand it, this is the same way that it works for artwork, and the female figure is ever present in artwork, and so this becomes something that even the female form in artwork is used in the same way. So there is a reason why I use the female form, because it is very prevalent in the art world. Now, the ideal figure has changed over the centuries. Different cultures have different ideas, right? So like right now, we love the supermodel, right? We love them to be super tall, super thin, and honestly kind of look like prepubescent boys with breasts and really tall. But that's what's on our magazines. And even if that's not, like, if you've kind of embraced the everybody, right, embracing everybody type thing, most of our society has not. And you know this because every single magazine still has supermodels on the cover. And if it's not a supermodel, it's somebody famous, like an actress, and she has not just the pressures that society places on us, but even stronger, because if she doesn't look perfect, then the world attacks her for, say, putting on a few pounds, and how dare she do such a thing? God forbid. So, that's kind of where we are. But many cultures now have very different ideas that disagree with that. So it's not even just time period, but different cultures. And so, this is not the only ideal form at the moment. But if we look over time, especially like, let's say, the Renaissance, during the Renaissance, if what we consider the ideal form existed in a woman, she would not survive, because she wouldn't get married. Like, a man would not want her as a wife. And back then, I'm a total feminist, so don't get me wrong here, but back then that was your only way of survival. You were owned by your father, and then you were owned by your husband, basically. And back then, the ideal female form was slightly overweight with good hips. And the reason why is because most children didn't live past their fifth birthday. And so, what was considered to be the ideal woman was someone who could bear many children, someone who could bear many sons, to ensure that they would have an heir, that man would have an heir, and that's what he was looking for. And if you think about it, if you look at different paintings from the Renaissance, say the Mona Lisa as an example, she has that form to her. And so it's just to kind of get you to understand that what they considered the perfect beauty in a woman is different from what we consider the concept of beauty today. And this is the same in art. There's different concepts for what we believe to be beautiful, and there's different categories of it, but the female form becomes something that we look at. I mean, if you've ever been in a big city where there's been a lot of posters up, and then they kind of degrade, and then another one goes up, and then it degrades, and it has like kind of this worn down texture to it that's kind of beautiful. Now if you really look at it, it's pretty ugly, right? Like, there's nothing really beautiful about it, except it's got this amazing texture to it, and that's what you're really drawn to. But there's something about the aesthetics of that make it something beautiful, and that's why it's not about beauty. It's not equivalent to beauty. It's about the concept of making something beautiful. Um, and so that we can talk about how that wall is aesthetically pleasing, and we can talk about how Mona Lisa is aesthetically pleasing. and you point out the characteristics of it. Why? What I just pointed out about what makes that wall so great, those juicy check textures, um, and that kind of that worn down quality, that's the aesthetics of it. That's what we want to see in it, and that's what makes it great. And there's where the aesthetics come in. Now, fine art is art for ideas, expression, and beauty. Um, and you can almost say that it has no purpose, right? Its only purpose is for ideas, for thought, for expression. These are your paintings, your drawings, your sculptures, etc., right? These are the things that are made just to look at. Their only function is to be looked at, right? And then we have applied art, and is the artwork that's made for a practical function. Things like furniture design, craft, jewelry, woodworking, architecture, etc., right? That ceramics bowl that you got out late last night to have cereal because you were too tired to make dinner. So that's the difference between the two. One you can only look at, and one will have a purpose. Um, Now we have composition, and composition is about the way an artwork is organized. So it's how the artist puts things together in an artwork. Um, and it also is interchangeable for a two-dimensional artwork. So like the piece of paper, the way that like we will talk about the composition, meaning like it's still about the way that things are organized, but it is often used as a generalized phrase for the entire two-dimensional artwork. Whereas you can talk about composition and focus in a smaller area and not just talk about the whole thing. Now, we were looking at different two-dimensional artworks and different three-dimensional artworks. Your two-dimensional artworks have height and width. Three-dimensional artworks have height, width, and depth, right? So if it's hanging on a wall and it doesn't come down onto the floor, it's two-dimensional. And the three-dimensional, exists in space like we do. The only thing that would be three-dimensional that does not exist in space, there are relief sculpture where it's carved into a building facade, but it looks three-dimensional, right? You can tell that it's been carved, and those figures have some three-dimensionality to them. Now, you guys have already learned about iconography because you had homework due already. But just as a reminder, iconography is the study of signs and symbols in an artwork. The signs are the things that tell you like place, time, social class, etc. And then the symbols in the artwork are kind of the metaphorical things where you find symbolism. So just to give you some examples, we have jewelry as an applied art, the Taco Bell ad. Now this is a very old ad, so I don't think if you show up to Taco Bell you'll be able to get an 88-cent Crunchwrap Supreme. Sorry about that. But think about it. The advertising has a functional purpose, right? Because I'm sure some of you were hungry while you were watching this and you saw that and you went, man, that looks good. I want to go to Taco Bell. And the ad served its purpose. The ad's job, right, is to make you want to go to the restaurant. And so if it can do that, then it's done its job. We have architecture as a applied art. This is at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. This is the building that it's in. But the sculpture of Lincoln at the Lincoln Memorial is fine art. There is a functional purpose to the building, but there is not a functional purpose to the sculpture. The sculpture is just there for beauty and to look at. But the building itself protects you from the rain. It could be used as shelter if necessary. So it has a functional purpose. This is Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. It's a fresco painting, which is painting into plaster on a wall, and this would be fine art. And then this is fine art photography. Now, photography can exist as fine art photography or commercial photography. So it depends on what is being photographed to determine if it's fine art or applied art. If it's a picture of a Louis Vuitton bag because it's being used to sell it, or it's a picture of models that are going to go into a catalog, right? These are commercial photographs, and these would be used and considered as applied art. But here we have fine art photography because this is just meant for ideas. This is Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother from 1936. And in this photograph, we have a woman whose name is Florence Owens Thompson. She's with her children living in a migrant camp in Nipomo, California. And what's important is that this is during the Depression. Dorothea Lange had been hired by the Farm Security Administration program, and she was sent around the United States to document the plight of the migrant worker. And when she encountered Thompson, she said, "I saw and approached the hungry and desperate mother, as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions. I made 5 exposures working closer and closer from the same direction." And then this photograph, known as Migrant Mother, became widely circulated in magazines and newspapers, and it became the symbol of the plight of the migrant farm worker during the Depression. And what ended up happening was people who saw it did end up sending money to the Farm Security Administration, and they were able to get all of the migrant workers at this particular camp home. What had happened was the pea crops that she was there to pick along with the other migrant workers, they encountered a frost, which is, an unseasonable frost in California, and all of the pea crops died. And so none of the field workers got any money out of it, and their livelihoods were devastated by the failure. Later, Thompson recalled that she and her children had been living on frozen vegetables from the field and wild birds that the children caught. And she had just sold her tent for food, which is why they're not in a traditional tent. And so just that's kind of what was going on here in this particular photograph. Now we're going to move on to the style terms. Now the style terms are very important. It's important that you know and understand these. These are going to be required on your midterm. Now I call this the Art Basics and Style Terms presentation because the first half is about basic terminology and the second half is about the style terms. It's important that you understand the difference. A style term is a term that describes the identifying appearance of an artwork. And those basic terms in the art terminology that we went over are just terms that help you understand how to talk about art in a very minimal sense. So this is kind of a first classification of art here, are these style terms. And so it's important that you know that these are the terms that are going to be on the midterm. And it's really easy to deal with the style terms. So we have representational and non-representational, those first two terms. Representational, representing, means it's depicting something recognizable, right? The painting represents a shoe. The painting represents a family. Non-representational means there's nothing recognizable. So you see lines and shapes and colors, but you don't see anything else. It's important to understand that it can be severely abstracted. Think Picasso, Cubism, woman that you can barely tell is a woman. She's got four noses and her face is falling apart. It's still a woman, it's still recognizable. Even more abstracted than that, you see lines and shapes and things, but you see an eye, you see a foot, you see a fish. There is something representational there. So as long as there is something that you recognize, it's important to understand that it is a representational artwork. So this artwork is representational because I see ... Or this is a non-representational artwork because it is not depicting anything recognizable. There are only, parallel lines and circles in the artwork. Be specific. It's important that you guys practice specificity now, because the number one thing that gets points taken off your grade is vagueness. So it's important that you are specific. What I just did when I was talking about, say, the representational, let's talk about the vase. The vase is a representational artwork because I see a dragon on it. So what I just did was provide a visual cue or visual evidence. So I selected a style term and I used evidence from the artwork, something I see, to prove why it fits that style term. So visual evidence or visual cues are things in the artwork that I see that prove the style term I'm selecting, or as we move further in class, the theme I'm selecting, or the element, or the principle, so on and so forth. So visual evidence is very important because you can get the right style term, but if you don't explain it, then you won't get credit for it. So artwork is either going to be representational or non-representational, always. So the first question you ask yourself when you're coming up with style terms is there something recognizable in the artwork? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, it's representational. If the answer is no, it's non-representational. Now, the next 5 terms all deal with representational artwork, but the majority of artwork out there in the world is representational. So it's important to kind of understand that. But these are terms that you can use, and then there's terms on the next slide for representational artwork. And the terms on the next slide you can use for non-representational artwork as well. Now, if the artwork is representational, it's also either going to be realistic or abstract. So realistic meaning that it's as our eyes see in the world, like a photograph. What I'm looking at in the artwork could exist in the world and be believable. Like not Who Framed Roger Rabbit type thing, right? But like actually exist in the world. So the vase, that dragon on the vase, could definitely not exist in the world. And it's not because dragons don't exist, but because if they did exist, it would be a lot more detailed than this if it was realistic. And again, now I'm providing visual evidence for why it's abstracted. So, first question, is there something recognizable? And if it's a representational artwork, the second question is it realistic or abstract? And then you have 7 more terms that you can use, and you only need a third term on the midterm. So I think you'll be able to handle that. Now, idealized means that it is made to be perfect. Now, this considers aesthetics, and something like the vase on the right, this was one of those art forms that China, and this was made in China, that became kind of the gem of China at this time period. And they would go out of their way to make it as ornate and beautiful as possible. And this does not have that, right? It's got beautiful decoration on it, but it's a simple vase. So this would not be idealized, because it's not up to that level of elegance and perfection. So for idealized, it does differ from time period to time period, what is perfect and what is not perfect. And it's not just about the human form, but a lot of times it's easy to see it when there are humans in the artwork, like Michelangelo, who carved amazing sculptures and painted the Sistine Chapel. The the painting where God is reaching down to Adam, that would definitely be idealized. The Greeks who made sculptures to be gods, Egyptians made some idealized artwork as well. It looks completely different. It doesn't have the same level of realism, but that doesn't mean that it can't be idealized, because they made their artwork for a very different reason. And so they aren't trying to make it realistic, but because of its purpose, in a lot of ways, it depends on what it is that you're looking at. But say the mask of Tutankhamun, that particular mask made of gold with so much blue inlay, and that the way that was made definitely has idealism in it. Naturalistic is that it appears as it would in nature, not in the world, but in nature. So the trees look like trees, right? They're the right colors. It doesn't mean it has to be realistic. It can be abstracted. Think about like a 6-year-old's drawing, right? They make the grass green, they make the tree trunk brown, and the tree poof usually green. They make beautiful little flowers. They make a nice little house. Everything looks, they do their best to depict things the way that they appear in nature. So things can be abstracted, but if they appear the way that they would in nature, even if they're abstracted, it can be naturalistic. A lot of naturalistic artwork is going to be realistic, but not all of it. And so it's important to understand that. Now, stylized has to do with art that conforms to a preset style or set of conventions for a larger population. So, for instance, the porcelain that we see is recognized as ancient Chinese porcelain because of the convention set, right? The blue, the dragons, the landscape that's there, all of these things are preset conventions of ancient Chinese porcelain. And I'm sure most of you already recognized it as that before I even said anything. That's what we mean by preset conventions. The way that comic books have very specific style to them with the dark black outlines and things like that. Um, and so there are the way that things are created, if they are stylized, has to have they're conforming to some sort of preset style or set of conventions that have been set. So they could be set by the movement, possibly, but usually it's larger than that. They can be set by the country, they can be set by a movement, they can be set, like for instance, street art. Street art does have kind of a look to it. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't make whatever they want, but it has a very kind of that quick feel to it, that even if you take a photograph of it, and it still looks like street art. Even if they put it on a canvas, it still looks like street art. It has that kind of aesthetic to it. And so there's kind of like a preset style that goes along with that. And a lot of that comes down to the material they use. And so this is where stylization comes in. Now, all artworks have a cultural style. And you never define cultural style by saying an artwork has a cultural style because, like I just said, they all do. This is about the geographic area it's from. And when we determine the cultural style, it is about where the artist is from, where they're calling home. So, like, say we have a French artist, but they've moved to New York and now they're making artwork in New York. It's considered American art because that's where they're making the artwork. But so usually it's done by continent or country. Continent is if it's much older and we don't know exactly what the country is. But the distinct geographic area can be smaller than that. Like we can all recognize kind of artwork from the eastern seaboard, right? This is the artwork that fills probably most of your homes in some fashion, where you have a nautical theme. There's blue colors, seascapes, fishnets, rope finishes, shells, so on and so forth. I'm sure you guys can all add to that list, but since you guys understand and know what that is, I don't need to add to it more. But the way that you explain the cultural style is saying that the artwork's comes from the American culture, the French culture, the African culture, the Zimbabwe culture, if it's more specific. So it's just about like defining the culture. Again, right? Like I had said, you can't say it has cultural style because they all do. It's about explaining where it's from. The period style has to do with the dates it's made. And the period, again, think about like a period. This is not the date it's made, but from the period of time when it was created. And usually it's determined by centuries. And we will often say the early, middle, or late 14th century, just to be a little bit more specific. But also because we recognize the Eastern world, in Eastern art, the period is often defined by what part of the country is in charge. So, like in China, it's by the dynasty. So, like the Ming Dynasty. So it would be like the Ming period, or the Edo period in Japan is when what is now known as Tokyo was basically the capital. And what's the I'm going to move on to movement, but the reason why this is important is this is how artwork is set up in a museum. If any of you have gone into a museum and you think about it, it is set up um, by the period, the culture, and then like the movement. One thing to, just so that you guys are aware, in period, is that the older it is, sometimes the period and the culture are the same thing. So like earlier when I said ancient Chinese art, that's both the culture and the period, because it's much older and it's from before the Common Era. We don't have a specific time frame on it. I mean, we can't make the period that much smaller, and so ancient becomes the word that's used. Ancient Egyptian art, I'm sure you've heard that before. Now, movement means group style. So this is when a group of artists starts making work that that looks the same or has kind of a set of rules. So this is that, like I was mentioning earlier, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, pop art, think Andy Warhol and the soup cans, or artwork that has that comic book style is also a part of pop art. But also keep in mind that movements didn't exist until the modern period in art. So don't try to invent movements, prior to artwork becoming modern. And the modern period begins in the early 17th century, in the 1600s, with Géricault, who made the painting. I think I showed you guys, I told you the story. No, that was my drawing class. I'm wrong. The individual style is when an artist has a specific or distinct look. If you can tell who the artist is just by looking at the artwork, or your research starts to talk about special characteristics only that artist does, then the artist has an individual style. So it's about something being unique, and many artists have an individualistic style. All contemporary artists have an individual style because it's required. We don't do a lot of movements anymore. Everything is about kind of doing your own thing and trying to make it look as unique as possible. Okay, so here is Ansel Adams' Clearing Winter Storm, circa 1937. The C period here in front of the date is circa, and that's CIRCA. All that means is about. So this was made roughly in 1937. Because this is an academic field, if we don't have exact dates, we put the circa in front of it. The circa could be, 100 years. It could be even more than that, the older the artwork is. But we're pretty sure it was created in 1937, but because we don't have proof that this particular photograph was done then, even though many other photographs from Yosemite were done then, which is where this photograph was taken, we put the circa in front of there. So I added some style terms here for you. We have representational, because it's depicting something real, or it's depicting something that we see. Naturalistic, because it's showing us nature, right? You could also use realistic. I mean, it is a photograph, so we are seeing things the way that they would exist in the world. The movement that this would be a part of is landscape photography. There's a special section of photography that is landscape photography. And Ansel Adams does have an individualistic style. The way that this has like that extreme contrast and all that fogginess in the air, he uses a special filter, or he used a special filter, this red filter, and it's what upped the contrast and gave all of these juicy little textures that we see. And people have still today tried to implement his techniques, but his technical expertise like just can't be replicated. He was an American conservationist movement as well, where his photographs are contributed, because Ansel Adams is actually responsible for keeping the national parks alive. At this time period in the 1930s, during the Depression, they considered opening the parks and um, and actually developing on top of them to revive the economy. And Ansel Adams was a part of the the conservation movement, and he went around to the different national parks, photographed them. They were shared in magazines and newspapers around the world. And this is the first time that many people saw them and saw what untouched land looked like. And from around the world, not just Americans, but people from around the world saw the need and necessity and beauty, and that it needed to be preserved, and sent money in, and petitioned to keep them alive. And it's the reason that we still have them. Now I have this artwork here by Piet Mondrian, composition 2 in red, blue, yellow, 1930. This is an oil on canvas painting. This, as you can clearly see, is non-representational. We only have shapes, some rectangles and some black lines. This is a part of the minimalism movement. A lot of it's based on math in the minimalism movement, but it was a push against abstract expressionism and color field painting that was all about like feelings and and letting paint just kind of take over everything. And so the minimalism movement kind of reacted against that. It had things much more precise, and a lot of it was sculpture, but Piet Mondrian was an individual who did painting in this movement. He has an individual style. He's known for the primary colors on a black and white grid. And so again, there's the three terms that you could have come up with. And here we have Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, and the artwork is Grand Odalisque from 1814. Now, a lot of students, when they first look at this, they think that it is realistic, but I want you to really look at this spine. We know it's representational because we see a woman, and we see curtains, and we see a pipe, and we see all sorts of stuff, right? So it's definitely representational. But even though this might be better than you could paint for sure, right? He is known for abstracting the proportions of the figures he painted. That's actually one of the things that gives him his individualistic style. He's most known for painting female nudes with distorted proportions. And any type of distortion in the artwork makes it abstract. So here we have abstraction. It's a part of the neoclassical movement from the 18th century. And it was a revival of classical beliefs. So they approached ancient subjects with newer, more scientific approaches. So here he's interested in anatomy, and the fact that they have a much better understanding of anatomy now is why he can distort it in the ways that he does. The interest in the ancient worlds, Greece and Rome is what the classical beliefs are from, is because they had just uncovered Pompeii and Herculaneum, two cities that had been covered by volcanoes, and so they got a lot of artifacts. So they're getting a new look at Greece and Rome here. And what's interesting here is that some people loved it, but most people hated this artwork. He got a lot of flack for it. In fact, one critic went so far as to say she had 3 vertebrae too many. And some of the Ingres lovers decided they were going to prove, like more contemporary supporters, decided they were going to prove that critic wrong, and they actually did a full-on anatomy study to see, and she does not have 3 vertebrae too many. She has 5. So we know for sure she's abstract. Now here we have the Venus of Willendorf. This is actually the oldest sculpture that is fully intact. This is a very small sculpture. This is only 4 3/8 of an inch high. But, we have nomadic people, so of course they gotta have a sculpture that's nice and small. This is a representational artwork because it depicts a woman. But of course, as you can tell, it is abstracted. This is an idealized sculpture, so consider aesthetics here. And my notes kind of explain it on this slide, but by the enlarged breasts, the enlarged stomach, and then the very protruding vulva. I mean, we have lots, very, very detailed female equipment. And but we don't have a lot of details anywhere else. We also have the woman resting her arms on her breasts, which is something that women do naturally while they are pregnant. When they get to, like, at a certain point in pregnancy, this becomes something that all women do because of the way that breasts grow during pregnancy, and it kind of helps for comfort. And so because of that, it is believed that the woman is possibly pregnant. We believe it's a fertility sculpture. And we consider this idealized because there's many other Venus sculptures from this time period. Now, this is the only one that we found that's whole, but they've been able to piece them together. But they found them that have the exact same exaggerated features. So because the sculptures have the exact same features from sculpture to sculpture, we know that this becomes the ideal. Now the period here is the Paleolithic period, sometimes known as prehistory, and also known as ancient, right? It's called the Venus de Willendorf because, well, she was found in Willendorf. There's nothing real fancy about that. And I have one last one to show you. In 221 BCE, the state of Qin claimed victory over the other states, uniting all of China into an empire for the first time. It's actually how China got its name. And the first emperor, Shayangandi, was obsessed with attaining immortality. Work on his underground burial site began even before he united China, in his teens, actually, and continued until his death. The mound covering the burial itself has always been visible, but nobody knew of the treasures it contained until 1974. An archaeologist accidentally dug in the wrong place and found a terracotta army guarding his burial mound. It has been the most electrifying moments in the 20th century in archaeology because row upon row of life-size figures stand in their thousands. Soldiers, archers, cavalrymen, and charioteers. They faced east towards Mongolia, the direction in which the danger was expected to come. Now, I know they look ghostly gray here, but When they were new, they were painted in lifelike colors, and they had to be as realistic as possible. In fact, even though they're in the thousands and thousands and thousands, right? They are individualized. Each one has individual, this doesn't mean it has an individual style, but each one has individual characteristics to make them each their own person. Now, they have found that things like the ears were mass produced, but each one has its own face that is completely unique. They have dug up 3 different pits. The only place that they haven't dug up is at his actual, where his grave is, just, out of respect for his grave. And but we have over 59 square miles, just to give you an idea. We have a representational artwork here because it's an army. We see the army. And it's stylized. So by looking at the artwork, it is clear that it is ancient Chinese artwork by the hairstyles, the clothes, the facial expressions, even the mustaches on the men show what we see from other artwork from this time period as the ancient Chinese soldier. It's also idealized because Xiao Gandhi was obsessed with obtaining immortality. As a Taoist, that was his religion, it was important that it be as lifelike as possible, including real armor and real weaponry, because they believe that what you sow on earth, you'll reap in your afterlife. So he had to have it, it had to be as realistic as possible for him to be able to reap what he wanted in his afterlife. And then, of course, the culture and period would be ancient Chinese. They fall in one and the same. And that is the end of our lesson. I hope you enjoyed it.